And it came to pass in the days of the plain of Shinar that the earth groaned beneath the weight of great strife. 4 kings arose from the east, mighty and proud, led by Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, the scourge of nations. With him were Amraphel of Shinar, Arioch of Elasar, and Tidal, king of nations. They bound themselves in a league of conquest and fury to make war upon the giants, children of fallen watchers, who had taken dominion in the valleys of the earth. 10,000 giants, fierce and terrible in stature, dwelt in the land of Rephaim, of Anak, and of Zuzim. Their voices thundered like the crashing of storms. Their weapons were as great trees, and their shields like towers. They held the mountains in contempt, and rivers fled their path. From the north to the south their terror was known, and none dared rise against them, save the kings of the east, for their hearts were filled with ambition and the lust for dominion. Now the 4 kings gathered their hosts, chariots and horsemen, swordsmen and archers without number. They marched by night and struck by day, sowing fear among the sons of men. They swept through the valley of Siddim, conquering cities and binding kings in chains. But the giants watched from the hills with laughter, for they deemed no army could break their might. In the land of Hebron dwelt Abraham, friend of the Most High, a righteous man, mighty in faith, keeper of covenants. He walked with God beneath the stars of promise, and his soul burned with the fire of truth. Though he kept no army as kings do, 318 men of valor served in his house. Trained and steadfast, born in his tents, they awaited the day of their master's call. When the kings made war with the cities of the plain, they seized Lot, the son of Abraham's brother. They took him captive with his household and goods, and carried him off with the spoils of Sodom. A fugitive fled from the field of battle, and came to Abraham beneath the terebinth tree. He bowed low and cried, "O master of the tents, your kin is taken by the kings of wrath." Then Abraham rose up in holy fury, and girded himself with faith and command. He called forth his men, swift as the gazelle, and pursued the kings unto Dan. By night he divided his servants in companies, and smote the armies of the east with sudden terror. The giants heard the noise of battle in the distance, and their eyes turned toward the hills of the north. Chedorlaomer and his allies fled in shame, and Abraham brought back Lot and all his goods. But the wrath of the giants was kindled as fire, for they saw the defeat of those they had scorned. "Let us go forth," said Shobal the tall, chief among them. "Let the earth shake beneath our charge." They summoned their kin from caves and strongholds, and the 10,000 assembled like mountains in motion. Then the kings gathered again in desperation, for the giants came down with great noise. They smote the earth with clubs of stone, and their roars were like the sound of many waters. The armies of the kings trembled and faltered, for no spear could pierce the hide of the giants. Men fled as grass before the scythe, and the valley turned red with blood. Abraham saw the smoke rising from afar, and he inquired of the Lord Most High. "O Lord," he said, "shall the sons of Anak prevail?" And the voice of God came to him in the quiet, "Fear not, for I am thy shield, and the Most High shall strike the proud low." So Abraham called upon his men once more, and they came as one, prepared to follow him. On the plain of Mamre they met with the kings, weary and wounded, but burning with vengeance. "Shall we unite against the spawn of the watchers?" asked Abraham. And they answered, "Yea, let it be so." So the 5 became one under heaven's gaze, and they set their faces toward the horde. Though few against many, they bore the name of righteousness, and the Lord sent a wind before them. The sun rose upon the field of giants, and the armies of the kings came forth arrayed for battle. Abraham stood at the front, a staff in hand, and the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. The giants laughed, their voices shaking the hills. "Is this the army that dares defy us?" they cried. But the hosts of the Most High stood without fear, for they knew the battle belonged to the Lord. Then Shobal the tall raised his hand to strike, and the host of giants moved as a flood. Their feet broke stones, their fists cracked the air, and trees were torn like reeds before them. But Abraham lifted his eyes to heaven and cried aloud the name that is above all names. A bolt of fire fell from the sky, and the earth trembled at the glory of God. Many giants were smitten in that moment, their bodies consumed in divine flame. The kings beheld it and took courage, and their men charged with cries of faith. Steel clashed with bone, and arrows flew, but the giants still struck with monstrous power. Great was the slaughter on that day, as the heavens watched the fate of men unfold. 3 days the battle raged without ceasing, from the hills of Bashan to the waters of Kadesh. The giants pressed like a storm without end, and many of the sons of men were slain. But Abraham fought with the strength of angels, and his men followed with hearts aflame. Each night he prayed before the stars, and each dawn brought a new sign from heaven. On the fourth day came a sign in the sky, a wheel of fire turning in the clouds. From its midst came one clothed in white, whose face shone brighter than the sun. He descended with a sword of light, and the giants fell back in dread. For the Lord hath remembered his servant Abraham, declared the voice of the Mighty One. Then the angel smote the captains of the giants, and confusion spread among their ranks. Shobal the tall was struck in his brow, and he fell with a cry that shook the land. The rest fled toward the mountains in fear, but there was no place to hide from judgment, for the wrath of the Lord was upon them, and their sins rose up as a stench to heaven. The kings pursued with renewed courage, and their warriors struck with righteous fury. Abraham led the charge with lifted hand, and the men of his house were as lions. The giants stumbled and fell upon each other. In their flight they crushed their own kin. By evening the battle was turned, and the field was filled with the bodies of the fallen. 10,000 giants came in pride and wrath, but only a remnant crawled away in shame. The earth was cleansed of their abominations, and the cities of men breathed again. Abraham stood upon a high rock and gave thanks, offering praise to the Most High God. Melchizedek, priest of Salem, came forth to bless him, bearing bread and wine in the covenant of peace. Blessed be Abraham of the Most High, said the priest, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the God who delivered thine enemies into thy hand with mighty wonders. Abraham bowed before the priest and gave him a tenth of all he had taken. Thus was the faith of the patriarch honored, and his name made great among the nations. But the kings desired more than blessing, and sought to bind Abraham in oath and alliance. Take the spoils, they said, and rule with us. But Abraham lifted his hand to heaven and swore by the God of heaven and earth, I will not take a thread nor a sandal strap, lest ye say, we made Abraham rich. For his trust was in the Lord alone. So the kings departed, humbled and wise, and Abraham returned to his tents in peace. The valley was silent where the giants had roared, and the land was at rest from war. Men came forth from the cities in wonder, and the tale of the battle spread far and wide. Many turned to the God of Abraham, and built altars to his name. But not all the giants were slain. Some fled to distant lands and dark caves. They brooded in silence, nursing hatred, and vowed vengeance in the days to come. Yet the Lord set his mark upon the earth, that no host might rise against his chosen, and the stars above bore witness to the covenant, that Abraham's seed would possess the gates of their enemies. In the land of Canaan, peace endured for a season, and the people tilled their fields without fear. Flocks increased, and children played in the vineyards, for the dread of giants had passed from the land. Abraham built an altar beneath the oaks and offered sacrifice with a joyful heart. He called the place Jehovah Nissi, for the Lord had been his banner in battle. But high in the mountains, whispers stirred among the remnants of the fallen ones. Og of Bashan, last of the Rephaim, swore vengeance by the blood of his kin. He called upon spirits of the ancient deep and summoned powers forbidden and strange. The shadows lengthened over the hills, and the ground groaned with hidden unrest. Then came the word of the Lord to Abraham, in a vision by night, saying, Fear not, for I am thy shield, and thy reward shall be exceeding great. Yet he showed Abraham the days to come, when his seed would sojourn in a land not their own. 400 years of toil and trial, till they would return with a mighty hand. Still the Lord promised deliverance sure, and that giants and kings would fall before them. The iniquity of the Amorites was not yet full, but their pride rose like smoke into heaven. The covenant was sealed with a burning lamp, and the stars were sworn as witnesses. Thus Abraham believed and was counted righteous, a friend of God, father of nations. Years passed, and the tents of Abraham spread, from the river of Egypt to the great Euphrates. The land knew his name with reverence and awe, and his wells flowed freely across the plains. He judged with justice beneath the terebinths and taught his household the fear of the Lord. Though kings envied him, none dared strike, for heaven's favor was upon him. In time, the tale of the 10,000 giants faded, becoming legend among the tribes of men. But the children of Abraham told it by firelight, of how faith triumphed over might and fear. They spoke of the angel with the sword of flame and the fire that fell from the vault of the skies. Their hearts were strengthened by the story, and their souls anchored in hope. In the court of Pharaoh and the palaces of Shem, the scrolls recorded the war of wonders. Wise men marveled at the might of the Almighty, who fights for the humble and brings giants low. Abraham's name was etched in stone, a testimony to the power of belief. His seed became a blessing to the earth, and nations gathered in his light. Even among the scattered giants afar, the dread of Abraham's God remained. They taught their offspring to shun his name and hid from the face of heaven. But justice is not forgotten in the heavens, and the day of reckoning would return. For the Lord watches the paths of the proud, and his arm is not shortened to save. One day beneath the stars of Hebron, Abraham walked alone in quiet thought. He remembered the roar of battle and fire, and the cries of men and fallen beasts. But greater than war was the peace that followed, a stillness born of divine presence. He raised his eyes to the stars once more, and gave thanks for every promise kept. The Lord visited him again in the plains of Mamre, with angels clothed in flesh and light. They spoke of the future and the coming of a son, and the laughter that would fill Sarah's tent. Even as judgment approached Sodom's gates, God remembered Abraham's plea for mercy. Such was the bond between man and Maker, born of trust, obedience, and covenant. And though many years would pass before fulfillment, every word of God proved steadfast and true. For he who delivered from giants and kings would also bless barren wombs with joy. In the great tapestry of time and nations, the name of Abraham was woven in gold, a patriarch of promise, a warrior of faith, a man who walked with the Almighty. Thus was the tale of the great war written with ink of fire and parchment of stars. A war not only of swords and giants, but of belief versus blasphemy, faith versus fear. And though giants rose again in later days, none prevailed as they did before, for the Lord had marked his servant's victory as a sign to all generations after him. Children would ask their fathers at night, "Did the giants truly fall before one man?" And their fathers would reply with a smile, "Not before one man, but before his God." For though Abraham wielded no great blade, he carried truth in his heart and heaven on his side, and that was mightier than 10,000 foes, mightier than the hills or the giants that walked them. As time passed, tombs were sealed and cities rose, empires came and went like wind. But the name of Abraham endured the ages, etched in heaven and remembered on earth. Kings sought his blessing and prophets his path, for his walk was a light to the nations, and the war he won by faith alone became the cornerstone of divine history. From his seed came tribes and tongues, and a people set apart for the Lord. They carried his mantle and bore his burden, and faced giants in their own time. Yet each time they remembered the days of old, their courage returned like morning sun. For the God who fought for Abraham then would fight again and always. So let the tale be told in every land of the 10,000 giants and 4 kings, of the man who stood with God alone and conquered what none dared face. Let the name of the Lord be magnified, who exalts the humble and casts down the proud. For his wonders are not bound to time, nor his arm to any age. Let the scrolls be opened and the horns be blown in remembrance of that mighty day. Let singers chant by the fireside of the thunder of war and the silence of peace. For the battle belonged not to flesh, but to the Lord who reigns forevermore. And his word shall never pass away, as long as stars burn and skies remain. Thus ends the tale of the great war of old, when faith met fury and heaven came down. Remember, O nations, the covenant of light, and walk in the path of the friend of God. Though giants may rise in forms anew, the Lord is ever the shield of the faithful. So let the children of Abraham rejoice in hope, for the victory is his from age to age.